Okay, so I want to finally go ahead and make a Superman review. Simply because I'm a hardcore DC fan, y'all. Hardcore DC fan. And I don't know. So my expectations for this film going in were all over the place. So when I first heard that James Gunn was going to be doing it, um, I was kind of about it because I've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy. I did appreciate those films, but at times they were too funny. They were way too much comedy, and it was, in my opinion, inappropriately timed. But when he said that this wasn't going to be that, of course he said that in 2023. I was more hopeful. Um, Going to go see this film. My brother, who is also a DC fan, DC over Marvel, y'all. We watched it, and at the very end, when everything was over and done with, um, we looked at each other, and he was like, "No," and honestly I felt the same way. Uh, Disappointment flooded through me several times in the film. First off, the opening, the origin, lack thereof story, I should say, when they started talking about 30 years ago and 3,000 years ago and all of this stuff about years and years ago and time has passed and blah blah blah, and then it said 3 hours ago for the first time Superman lost his first battle against the Hammer of Barovia. I'm over here like, okay, so he gets his ass kicked, and then you see him falling, and then he calls Crypto. Crypto takes him to the Fortress of Solitude. I'm like, okay, the battle's over. No, this motherfucker decides to go in there and get healed, right? Then goes back and proceeds to get his ass kicked again. And during this fight, we're starting to see how and or why this happened, and it doesn't make sense. Everyone who's familiar with Superman's power set knows that one of his greatest assets is his sensitive hearing. And when I say sensitive, I mean sensitive. Like, his hearing is like one of his like go-tos. He dodges a lot of things because of how quickly he can hear things coming from like hundreds of miles away. So if he's fighting this Hammer of Barovia, right, with super hearing, he can't hear less than 20 feet away all these people yelling commands. Like, you have Lex's entire command center literally out, like, watching so close that they could probably spit and hit both of them. And Superman just like, let me go ahead and ignore these people cheering on. And I hear Lex's voice. I know who Lex Luthor is. I hear his voice, and I hear him yelling commands. And I'm just gonna go ahead and ignore that and fight this person that keeps beating my ass with all these things flying around. Like, you didn't think that those little satellite drone things surrounding the Hammer Barovia were a thing? Like, they weren't important. So you just focused on him. Someone who I don't know. That entire opening fight to me was piss poor because it didn't showcase Superman's intellect. Anyone who knows anything about Superman knows that when it comes to his fighting style, his fighting experience, though he is a bruiser, he's not stupid. He's not like a Bane type fighter. He's going to go in and just start punching until something stops. He's very strategic when he fights. And someone who's watched animated series and animated shows with Superman, who wants to minimize the damage he inflicts on other people as well as the surrounding area, knows that he's a smart fighter. That fight was not what Superman would have done. And it really, really hurt to watch. Like, it's one of those moments where you were kind of, as a DC fan, I was kind of embarrassed to watch, to know that this is how some people would have written him. Second of all, let's talk about Lex Luthor and that little team of his. Lex Luthor wouldn't have done that. Lex Luthor is a very powerful, proud man. If he wanted to take down Superman, he would definitely have done it himself. He wouldn't need all of those people there. He also wouldn't have had them there because they were loose ends. Lex Luthor is very secretive about his plans. Far too many people there who could have questioned him, who could have betrayed him, which again is what happened in the movie. But that's also one of the things that I dislike the most because that's not how Lex Luthor operates. He's very much, if I can't do it on my own, then I shouldn't be doing it type of person. He will make alliances where he needs to, but the intent is always to have the upper hand. In that situation with too many variables, he didn't have the upper hand. At any moment, any one of those people could have flipped on him, which, again, is what happened. And he decided that he was going to, I don't know, have this team like it that was, and everyone's like, oh, this was the best Lex Luthor. Canonically, no, absolutely not. I honestly feel it was one of the worst Lex Luthor portrayals that I've ever seen because they completely destroyed a character to create something like a version of him, a shell of him. And maybe the point is to have him learn from this experience, but at the same time, we as the audience are not led to believe that. And so that is my issue there with the Lex Luthor issue with the whole team thing. Lex as himself was just, my opinion, a poorly written character. There's a time when, so after Superman gets his ass stomped and he's in the crater, uh, you have this one guy come up and try to help him out of the crater. I don't know why he thought that Superman needed his help. I mean, it's Superman. But they decided that they were going to use this one dude to help lift him up out of the which he really didn't do. I don't under I, so if you watch the movie and he goes out into the craters like, I'm gonna help you, Superman, I'm gonna help you, and Superman's like, okay, cool, and he reaches out his hand, but Superman still pulls himself up, and I didn't get that until later on in the film, where, because at that point Lex is still watching the whole thing as the hammer of Barovia flies away. Lex is watching and he's like, hey, tells one of his little goons, find out who this person is. They find out who this guy is. Okay, cool. I was like, why is that important? Because Lex decides to kidnap this dude and uses him as leverage. And in one of the scenes where everyone's like, oh, this was the best. This was the best scene. Oh, that's solidified. Oh, that's so evil. And I'm thinking to myself, again, that's not Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor doesn't do shit like that. That was very much Joker coded. It didn't fit Lex's style. So let me go ahead and explain this part to you. So Superman gets, I don't even, so this is so dumb. So I mean, I'm spoiling everything anyway. So let me just go ahead and tell you. A lot of shit in this movie happens off screen, and it happens at an undisclosed time before the events of this film. So at this point, you have a clone of Superman. You have Lex, who apparently knows where Superman's solitude, Fortress of Solitude is. He sends his goons to find it. They go there. They find Crypto. They find all of Superman's robots, and they also are able to hack into Kryptonian technology and restore an old message that was sent to him when he was sent with him while he was a baby. And I hated that part, y'all, where they fixed the message, and the message is pretty much tanking Jor-El and Lara's character assassination of two beloved DC characters, where they're pretty much telling Superman to become the god of Earth, to take over the planet, to kill anyone who stands in his way, and to reproduce and multiply and have lots of children and all sorts of shit. And the problem that I have with that, right, is that you sent this with a baby who doesn't know language. How was he supposed to decipher any of that? How was he supposed to understand what his parents were saying to begin with? That entire thing to me was so stupid. And I know I'm getting off track, but the fact that you decided to assassinate two beloved DC characters blew my mind. In the theater, y'all, I was like pissed. I'm like, that is so stupid. And then you take away the logic of that, because anyone who was a teacher before, because I used to teach, and you know that kids don't pick up stuff like that. There was no one there to tell him or show him how to speak Kryptonian or to interpret Kryptonian. And if there were, why was he adopted by the Kents? And if that were the case, why weren't the Kents killed and then he was taken back? There's just a whole bunch of stuff that's missing, right? They shouldn't have included that. That should not have been included whatsoever. It was stupid. It was unnecessary. And it was a huge fucking plot hole. And a lot of people were like, oh, you overthink things. No, I don't overthink things. In the middle of this film, I was trying to understand where this was going. And for this to be the catalyst that they went, it was illogical, it was stupid, it was unnecessary, and it hurt as a DC fan to watch. And so when this happened, the government wants to question Superman, so they arrest Superman, right? And they put him in handcuffs. And Superman's like, is this really necessary? And they're like, well, it's just the way things go. And technically, because you're an alien, you have no rights, yada, yada, yada. So my thing is, if Lex decided to kill him, right? Lex wouldn't go to jail on that premise because he doesn't have any like rights. Superman has no rights, right? So in case you're wondering where I'm going with this, I'm gonna skip ahead. Lex's entire motivation for everything that he's done was pretty much to get permission to kill Superman. But if Superman had no rights, right, then that means he also had no right to life, which meant that Lex didn't need permission to kill him. So the whole instigating the fight to get Superman to interfere with the whole Barovia going after Jangapur, whatever that place was called, that was all stupid and unnecessary if you were going to include that part where you said out loud that he had no rights. If Lex Luthor had government contracts and government contacts within several different government organizations around the world, he should already know that. If he knew that, then that meant the entire setup for this movie was pointless. And the moment he said that, I looked at my brother and I was like, what? So you're telling me that you're not going to read him his rights because he has no rights, which means he has no right to life because he's an alien life form. And that means anyone could have killed him at any time and they wouldn't have suffered any repercussions. To say otherwise is a direct contradiction with that statement that was made, that claim that was made that Superman had no rights. That you see where I'm going with this? And people are like, oh no, it was so good. I'm like, explain that part to me then. How did that happen and why was that okay? Why would they even mention that? And then he doesn't get due process. He gets locked up. The government knows that he's been locked up, but they just don't know where. That right there would be a huge red flag for me. Because Superman was on Lex's radar for a while. And earlier in the film, you had a bunch of government officials saying that, Lex, it seems you have an axe to grind. And he's like, no, I've got this issue with unchecked power, yada, yada, yada. So when Lex is finally given permission to, hold Superman, he doesn't tell anybody where. So you're holding this man, and you have the power to hold this man, but we don't know how you're doing it. Isn't that... And so he makes this whole... So they're holding Superman in this pocket dimension that Lex found. And they glossed over how he found it. And to be quite honest with you, I don't remember. I don't care. And he's got all these people there. People that have been missing for a while. And they're all connected to Lex Luthor. You're telling me that nobody put two and two together and be like, yo, this guy is kidnapping his political rivals and all the people, like his ex-girlfriends there and people that have betrayed him. You're saying that all these people went missing and nobody thought to look at him and ask him how. So now that he get that kind of stuff, y'all, they're like, how are you going to say that this guy's your savior, that he's got all the answers and he's linked to the missing people of like hundreds of different people? Like, I don't, okay. So fast forward, moving on, he gets Superman. And they're like, how are you going to hold him without kryptonite? And Lex is like, I've got a workaround for that. Enter, what was it, Metamorpho? Yes, Metamorpho comes into the picture. And I'm like, wait a minute. Where did he come from? They don't explain it. He's just there. There's possibly going to be some sort of film where, or some sort of backstory where they talk about how he got his powers and how he ended up, in Lex Luthor's employ or imprisoned or whatever. And Metamorpho's there, and he turns part of his body into kryptonite, and it depowers Superman. While in his depowered form, the guy I was talking about from earlier, Lex kidnaps him, takes him there, and he's like, I see this is one of your friends, yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking to myself, some random guy decides that. In the films, Superman's like, he gave me a hot dog once. And I'm thinking to myself, Lex is supposed to be this mastermind, like, and he's got all this surveillance and shit. And he didn't know that this guy didn't mean anything to Superman. And Superman's like, he gave me a hot dog once. What are you talking about? And I'm in the theater like, Jesus Christ, this is so bad. And so he has the guy and he's got handcuffs, and then the guy is like, Superman, I've got no family. I'm quote unquote nothing, essentially willing to fall on the sword for Superman, saying, don't tell him anything. And Superman's like, I don't know what he's talking about anyway. So the entire time, this is all happening. I'm thinking to myself, what's the point? Like, what is he trying to get out of this? Superman is in a vulnerable state. He's got no reason to lie. He's literally dying. So there was no need to kidnap anybody, right? So what was the point? What was the point? And so he pulls out a gun and he's playing Russian roulette with this guy's life. And he's over here spinning the gun and he clicks it once and he's like, okay, well, guess round two. Does it, spins it again after asking him a question that Superman didn't have the answer to. As the audience, we knew that Superman didn't have the answer to it. Clicks it again and it blows the guy's head off. And of course, we don't see that because this is a PG-13 film. So it goes away from it and it shows the guy just collapse. And Superman screams and Metamorpho's like, like, I can't believe he did that. Look at all the people that are in cages around you. And some of the reasons why they're there. And you're like, and he kidnapped your baby. And he's holding your baby hostage, and so you would work for him, and you didn't think that he would shoot somebody in the head. And then the fucking comedy that James Gunn is known for is like, Lex is like, well, I figured that would lasted longer, but I guess I will go and find someone else you care about. Probably this Clark Kent guy that. And when he said that, y'all, he said, I'm gonna go and find this Clark Kent guy that you keep interviewing or keeps interviewing you or whatever. And as he's floating away, I'm again taken out of the movie because if you've been studying him for so long and you have all this information on Superman, how do you not know that Clark Kent isn't real? Like, you would figure he would look into Clark Kent, right? You would figure he would like go deep dive into this person and realize that something was amiss, right? No. So he decides that he's gonna go and make that statement, and it just took me out again. All of this surveillance, all of this quote unquote years and years of stuff that you were doing, you've never seen Clark and Superman together, ever at the same time, right? You couldn't put two and two together. And then they talk about these glamour glasses, something that was inserted into the film like later on. Even so, unless you have like a robot that looks like Superman while Clark is talking to Superman, I don't understand how no one figured that out. Or should I say how Lex, someone as smart as Lex, couldn't figure that out. Like, that to me was an unnecessary, again, unnecessary thing to say. You didn't have to say that, James. You didn't have to write that in like, oh, I'm going to go find, the reporter who you keep getting all these interviews from. We I I was taken out, y'all, taken out so hard. And then after that guy was killed, you have fucking Metamorpho bawling. He's like, he killed him. I can't believe he did that. And I'm like, really? You can't? Anyway, moving on. The side characters: Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawk Girl. Not a fan. I never liked Guy Gardner. None of the Green Lanterns like Guy Gardner. And it really bums me out that Nathan Fillion has played Hal Jordan before, but they chose to go with Guy Gardner. and there was no reason for it unless it was a licensing issue that they had no choice but to use Guy Gardner. Because I think Hal Jordan would have been a much better person, and I get it. Lanterns is getting its own movie coming up here in 2026 or 2027. Okay, fine. They still could have used somebody else. Let's be real. Hawk Girl was useless. I love the actress. I love Dora the Explorer. Hawk Girl was done poorly, and I guess they're not going with the Thanagarian invasion. I also don't like the fact that her wings are like the ones from Black Adam, where they're part of the suit and they're not actually hers, because Thanagarians actually have wings. And so, unless they're going to sort of reimagine that or explain that a different way, I never liked that part. She flies using wings that aren't hers, but part of a suit. Didn't care for that. I liked Mr. Terrific. Um, and I felt like he was underutilized. But again, at the same time, he's so smart. I don't know why he wasn't the one who thought of the plan. Because if we're being 100 towards the end with the Rift, Guy Gardner would have been much better there than over in Barovia and Jengapur. They could have sent Metamorpho and Hawk Girl to take care of that. Like, Metamorpho definitely could have taken care of that on his own. He didn't need Green Lantern there. Green Lantern services were much better utilized in Metropolis, because Metropolis was a world ending situation. What was happening in Barovia and Jengapur was not. And so, didn't care for that part. Then you have the nanites, and I need people to tell me if I'm wrong with this. So the engineer ends up putting nanites in Superman's lungs after Mr. Terrific has already inserted his own nanites in Superman's blood to track him. You're telling me that these things are in his lungs and he just flies straight up into the air, right? Straight up into the air. He's getting his ass punched and kicked by his clone, which people are like, I wonder who Ultraman is. I guess because I'm a DC nerd, I already knew. But he's getting his ass kicked by his own clone, and the engineer's trying to slow him down and putting more and more nanites on him, more and more nanites on him. And he goes up into the air, high, 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 and it comes slamming down on Earth, right? And then just starts puking up the nanites. And let's to be clear, he's not puking them up; they're in his lungs, so he's like hacking them up. And I'm trying to understand. So, from my understanding, he destroyed the nanites with pure like brute force. Like, he used his fall from grace, so to speak, to destroy them. And when he did that, they just were inoperable. He just hacked them up. That's what I got from that. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, because I still don't understand what that part was for. And if that were the case, the amount of force that he could have mustered to punch himself in the stomach to do the same thing, why didn't he just do that? Like, maybe I'm confused because I don't get it. I never understood that part. I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. Don't understand how he was able to get those things out of his mouth. Second of all, his clone. Apparently, his clone is too dumb to teach anything to, except for really intricate martial arts moves using an alphanumeric code for each move. That part was stupid. That part was dumb. I did. So you're gonna tell me that I'm gonna clone Superman? First of all, that he says he cloned him from a piece of hair, right? That he found from one of his many battles. How did you identify that it was his? And if it was a singular piece of hair, singular strand of hair, as he says in the movie, how was there enough of it left to create a viable clone? Because I don't know much about cloning, but I know this much. You need to be 100% certain that what you're cloning with a small piece of hair is going to come out the first time, because you can only use X amount. You only have X amount of tries. It's not perpetual, and you can't use the clone DNA to clone and in like forever. So if whatever you clone comes out wrong, you can't use that DNA. That has to be destroyed. You have to still go back to the source. If you only had one strand of hair, you got it to look exactly like him, but cognitively he was not all there. Yet he was able to understand intricate alphanumeric commands while also learning martial arts. You see how that's stupid? You see how that like they turned it into the Indoraptor from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and that's not what it is. That's not how it should have been, in my opinion. That was dumb. They wanted to create something that was powerful enough to take on Superman, but something that could also be controlled. So they essentially did what Zack Snyder did in Batman v Superman, which is created Doomsday, but it wasn't Doomsday. It was something else that acted just like Superman, but was too dumb to be Superman. You see how it gets really convoluted, and so people are like, "Oh, you're picking things apart." Well, I'm just trying to understand how they got to this point because it doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. Also, you have an explanation of when they're talking about the team that Lex is putting together to take down Superman. He also mentioned in the explanation when it came to Ultraman that the government was somehow involved. But then at the end, he's like, "Oh, well, I did this." Which one is it? Because in the little description, and it showed the engineer, and they went into how and what they were. The government was involved with Ultraman, according to Lex in the movie. Maybe I should go. Well, I'm not going to go watch it again, but maybe I'll look it up and see if I'm correct on that. Because if that were the case, and they had a clone of Superman that was only able to be controlled by Lex, and Lex wanted to take out the actual Superman, huge conflict of interest. Huge conflict of interest. The entire thing to me, y'all, was just bad. And everyone's saying it was such a good movie. I don't know how they got to that point. The real issue, though, that I don't think people are willing to take a look at, it's not DC, it's Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers does not want to allow DC to have the potential that it needs to be successful. Because let's be clear, DC isn't Marvel. DC is violent. DC is rated R. I'm not just talking about Batman's villains. I'm talking about Wonder Woman's villains. You know how in some iterations it's implied that Wonder Woman's mother, Hippolyta, was actually raped by one of the gods, and as a result, Diana was born. That is a rated R topic. You also have a lot of people in Amazonian mythology being gutted, being killed. Like it's hella violent in Wonder Woman's world. A lot of her villains are. Then you have Justice League Dark, which talks about the devil, Satan, all sorts of demons and shit. Zatanna, Doctor Fate, Clarion the Witch Boy. I'm not sure if they're ever going to bring him onto the big screen. He is a big bad, and he's got like this demon face, and it's fucking awesome. And he's a Lord of Chaos, and I love his fucking familiar. A familiar is a witch's like guide or whatever, but it's like Tikal or whatever or her name is. She's amazing, and it's all rated R. WB does not want to allow its source material, which is rated R, to be rated R, and so they keep fucking with it to the point where it's bad. And so for a hardcore DC fan, these movies will never be for me. I'm just going to stick to the animated cinematic universe because let's be real. Like anyone who knows anything about DC's animated movies, those movies are fucking amazing. You get people getting their hearts ripped out. You get people turned to ash. Um, Superman and Darkseid were fighting in the middle of a Metropolis at one point, and this is in the Superman animated universe. Superman realizes that he's beaten Darkseid to the point. Well, I wouldn't say he beat Darkseid because Darkseid's still up and walking. Darkseid decided to say, you know what, this isn't worth it. It's not going anywhere. It's a stalemate. So he starts walking away. You have a fucking police officer started bad mouthing Darkseid, and before he could finish what he was talking about, Darkseid laser beams And right there in front of everyone, including Superman, turned that guy to fucking ash, a pile of ash, right? And Superman's like, oh, and the crowd's like, oh, and the dark side's like, mm-hmm, and he leaves and he walks away. That was on a kids' cartoon, y'all, back in the '90s. Let some shit. They would never do some shit like that today. You have fucking Batman and Robin. Robin gets kidnapped by the Joker. He gets tortured. They show him getting tortured and brainwashed and turned into Joker Jr., right? They get Batman on the ropes. Joker hands him a gun, and he tells Joker Jr., which was Jason Todd, or is it Jason Todd? One of the many Robins. Make Daddy proud. Kill the Bat for me, right? Thinking that he was gonna do it. Jason's character, and they show this shit too, turns around on the Joker and shoots that motherfucker in the heart. And he's like, oh, that wasn't funny. And he falls over backward, blood coming out of it. Like, they actually had blood coming out of his mouth on a kid's cartoon. Granted, people were pissed, parents were pissed, and so they actually redid the entire sequence. That entire scene gets redone for when they show the movie again. If you want, you can actually watch it on YouTube, the original, and I think it was from Batman Beyond, like the Return of the Joker, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, where in one iteration, Jason or one of the Robins who gets brainwashed kills the Joker, shoots him in the heart, and he falls over on a like a pile of boxes. And then when they redid it, the Joker is running away, falls into a crevice and gets electrocuted. Um, that was the difference. And they also, of course, didn't show him. They just say ah, he screams ah, and then you see his outline. And they're like, oh no, it was confirmed the Joker did die that night. But that shit to me, y'all, that is DC right there. That's the shit that I love. That's shit I want to see, and that's the shit that WB refuses to show us. Because let's be clear, if you are a hardcore DC fan and you're saying that this is Superman, you must not have been a fan for very long. I was born in '92, so I don't even think I'm a hardcore Superman fan. Like, there's a lot that I had to go back and rewatch, and I had to look at comic books in a different way and read older comic books. I know that what we got was not Superman. It wasn't a cohesive story. It was a story that was filled with plot holes, and it took a character that I really enjoyed and turned him into something else. I'm not going to say whether or not this individual um, is a bad Superman. He's just a Superman. Not my favorite Superman, not by a long shot, but the writing could have been simple. It should have been dumbed down. The movie should have been longer. Um, and there were characters that shouldn't have been in it. I don't know. I don't know if I would have been able to fix it based off of what WB wanted. And therein lied the issue. WB was the problem. But anyway, I gave the movie 4 out of 10 stars, and people were like, "Oh my god, you're such a hater." I'm not a hater. It's just from a superhero movie, from a superhero standpoint, it didn't make sense. It was boring. It didn't make sense. It was boring, and a lot of I couldn't stand crypto. And let's be real. All the surveillance, all the surveillance that Lex supposedly did to study Superman over years, according to him in this film, he didn't know about Supergirl. He didn't know about Supergirl, and the fact that they had her in the very last scene of the movie pissed me off. When me and my brother saw her, he was like, "What?" in the middle of the movie, and I laughed because I was so floored that she existed the entire time. And if that was the case, why didn't she tell Clark about all the shit that the parents were doing? Does she have a secret harem somewhere? Like, come on. Are you serious? So anyone who knows anything, Supergirl was caught in a temporal vortex. So she was supposed to have gotten to Earth the same time that Clark did. She didn't. Well, in some iterations, she didn't. She got stuck somewhere and she ended up landing later. But there was also some canon where she was in a separate ship that happened to land elsewhere and she got stuck in a stasis pod and so but she didn't age. So somehow the older cousin is technically physically the younger cousin. It can get all very confusing and very convoluted. I'm not sure where James Gunn is going to go with this, but the fact of the matter is if you have Supergirl that already existed and no one cared to talk about that until the last minute and a half of the movie, what are you doing? You should have just left her out. I was legitimately just like my brother, what, but in a much more I can't believe this kind of way. It was dumb. They never should have did that to the people, to the audience. It was stupid. As I said, 4 out of 10 stars. Hate me if you want to. I didn't care for it.